open with you, but more an empirical relationship. And these are the elements of productivity. If you sort of try and analyze them, a large element of productivity is dependent on team skills. We call it people skills, we call it competency in different names. But team skills plays a big role. Tools and the technology that you use to do a task plays a big role again. Complexity can have an impact. It can bring down productivity if it is not handled well. Look at the effect the process can have on productivity. It has a multiplying effect. It can take your productivity order of magnitude higher if it's handled well. So this is one thought that I want to leave with you. And I'm flashing the equation for you just to sort of take a look. That there are dependencies on team skills, people skills, competencies. There's a large impact that tools, technologies can have on productivity. Complexity, if not handled well, can bring down productivity, or if handled well, can jump your productivity up. And the multiplier effect that processes can have, good processes defined well with practitioners in mind, can have a huge multiplier effect. The other thought I want to leave with you today, in the next 5-6 minutes, is about the difference between individual and team productivity. All of us have this concept of productivity. And if you just go back to your school times, right, when you were studying for your exams, the whole idea of productivity was lock yourself up in a room, don't interact with anybody, essentially keep to yourself, focus on the task at hand, and you will be productive. Today, when we are required to work in teams, and most of them 5,000, 10,000 miles away, people whom you haven't met, people who are working from different organizations, client organizations, partner organizations, that whole concept of productivity is sort of turned on its head. You are required to collaborate, which means you are required to talk, communicate with people. You are not required to keep to yourself, which means you are not doing your stakeholder management and activities well. You are required to make sure that information is shared on a continual basis, which means you are in a constant touch with the colleagues in the team, either within your organization or outside. So look at these two completely different concepts of productivity. Individually, where you are essentially keeping to yourself, you are looking at focusing on the task, you are not looking at interacting with people, and the team productivity, where you are actually doing the opposite of two. How do you balance the two? Because as an individual, your productivity is going to get aggregated at the team level, and as a team is where you have to really aggregate all of that and deliver what your client or your internal customers are looking for. So that's the second thought that I want to leave you with. Now, a couple of things that I sort of look at as practices that work well, and at Infosys, some of this is what we have tried to work with. Obviously, the time thread there is the methodology, which sort of sits in the background, ties up all of these things. The first point I want to talk about is the practitioner's first aspect. Now, this is where we are essentially talking about keeping the person or the people in mind. The practitioner, whether you are talking about a developer, whether you are talking about a tester, you need to look at the capabilities of the person, you need to look at the capabilities, and I'm not talking about an individual as such, but looking at roles per se. What are the kind of capabilities, what are the kind of skills that are required to attain a certain job? What are the kind of skills that a typical person would have in that particular role? And then looking at keeping that practitioner in mind when you are defining the process or when you are trying to tie up things through a tool. And in effect, the tool is essentially trying to automate the process. So that's the first practice that I want to lay out. The second part is best of breed tools. Very important. I mean, at times we find that from a perspective of cost, in terms of trying to cut corners, you might have the temptation to bring in lesser capable tools, but that can play havoc. So wherever possible, wherever you are involved in defining processes and bringing in the right tools, don't look at cost as a constraint there. Try and work out models. Today, shared services and things like that, which Aman spoke about, provide a lot of possibilities, or cloud provides a lot of possibilities of providing the best of breed tools and sharing it across a large pool of people. Look at bringing in the best of breed tools that fit with your processes. The third aspect that I want to talk about a little bit in details is the whole idea of smart customizations. tools are there for everyone to buy, right? You can throw the money and buy the tools, best of tools. But what really differentiates the tools is one, the underlying processes that these tools are automating, and second, the way you are actually differentiating by creating smart customizations around these tools. So just to give a couple of examples, at Infosys, we have looked at building add-ins, plugins, and sometimes building parallel tracks to the tools, where the tools are able to enhance their capabilities. So a good example is where on top of the standard requirements tools, whether rational or something else, we have built capabilities where you could get metrics around requirements, how good your requirements are, what are the different quantitative numbers that you could associate with quality of requirements. It goes on to help and differentiate how well you do your requirements processes. Same thing on design, which is where a lot of issues get injected into. So at the design stage, we have built ideas where you could actually, at the click of a button, and these are add-ins to some of the standard UML tools, at the click of a button or the data modeling tools, at the click of a button, you could get to know how good your data models are or how robust your designs are. Complexity, coupling, depth, all of these aspects are taken care of. And therefore, when you actually head out to the coding stage, you are not going to be worrying about these aspects. All the design aspects are taken care of at the design stage. And similarly, at the coding stage, you could do these kind of validations automatically and so on. So the point I'm making is simply having the right process and the right tools may not be the complete solution. You probably also need to look at differentiation that you could bring in by doing these kind of smart customizations. The final point, active deployment, this is something I have been involved in for the past 4 or 5 years within the organization, where educating people on automation, trying to tell them why it is important to automate. Is one part of the whole awareness building, but really engaging with the project teams, which are our internal customers, at the right stages, early on when the projects start, or when typically at the pre-sale stage when the engagement deals are being sort of finalized, talking to them about what could be proposed, talking to them about what value it could bring in, help. So therefore, this kind of active deployment is something that plays a big role, is what I feel. So just to sort of summarize on this particular page, the entire tying up happens through the whole methodology pieces, and your methodologies could be varied. You could be looking at iterative, you could be looking at agile, you could be looking at things like lean tied up as part of your processes, and then looking at these 4 aspects where you bring the practitioner first, the actual users, the actual developers, testers, configuration managers. Looking at best of breed tools, don't focus too much on the cost. Today, you have different alternative means of looking at how to manage cost. Smart customization is really the key, I feel, differentiator, how you could gain maximum value out of your tools. And active deployment, focusing again on the project teams that you are working with or the account teams, engaging early, engaging at the right stages in the project, and making sure that deployment is at the highest levels. Now, all of this, if you notice on the previous page, right, we spoke about methodology, we spoke about tools, we spoke about people, practitioners, we spoke about customizations, all of this, and this is something that I have written about quite a number of times and spoken about quite a number of times, is what is really building a case for platforms where you tie up the methodology with the tools. You bring your ability to leverage people, leverage their skills. And therefore, what you gain out of these platforms is also the ability to cut across trends, or in real sense, work through the trends, which means you are going to be largely unaffected by trends. So today, if there is a change in methodology because you are moving from a conventional way of doing your work to something like agile, your platform should have the capability of handling that. Or if there are some things like open source that you are trying to adopt, your platform should be able to handle that. Therefore, looking at building a methodology which can tie up with the tools and providing your platform which leverages people, their skills and competencies is, I believe, the way forward in terms of looking at the whole factory approach. And finally, what sort of benefits we see with the platforms. First and foremost, you could look at platforms which are targeted, which means you could look at service offerings, you could look at technologies, you could look at packages which could have differentiated platforms from your perspective. Second, you could look at a much higher order of automation and reuse happening with the help of platforms. Third, again, goes back to the people skills. You could look at de-skilling, which means you could have a relatively lesser experienced person using the platform to do the job of a much higher experienced person, which in a services world is something quoted in gold. And finally, the ability to manage both the engineering aspects and the management aspects. You talk to a leadership level person, you talk to a middle manager, one of the things that they are craving for is updates, right? Reports and dashboards and things like that. And a lot of energy, a lot of time is spent in automating reports, a lot of time is spent in getting the right sense of data and information from across the field. And typically people spend time going after people, can you update me on this? Can you send me this? Can you email me this report? All of that can be gotten rid of. All of that can be automated using the platforms. And I'm talking about simpler tools, I'm talking about things which are readily available, open source, commercial, internally created as well. And all of these are the benefits that you could see from the platforms. So with that, I just want to take us back pre-lunch on the people track and say that competencies are important, and therefore, this quote from Robin Sharma, which I truly believe in. So whatever automation we talk about, whatever platforms I speak about here very passionately, I think at the end of the day, people and people with competencies are the ones who are driving those platforms to success, and we can never underestimate that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh, for bringing the Infosys experience of platforms and collaboration. This is the right time now to move over to Jay Kumar for an overall landscape of how he sees the entire tools universe and what are the lessons therein that we can apply to our own automation strategies.
Good afternoon. Okay. With the permission of Chair, I would like to take 2 minutes to digress from my role as a panel member to a role as a representative of Chennai Spin and say a few words. Please go ahead. I would like to congratulate Bangalore Spin for this wonderful achievement. 2 decades of existence, contribution to the industry at large, and also being a catalyst to create other spin forums. It's really marvelous to listen to the presentation given this morning. I was very much impressed. In fact, I used to come here during 90s and share some experiences, learning from Bangalore Spin, and quite a few of them implemented in Chennai Spin. I also believe that a lot of learning from Chennai Spin have been implemented in Bangalore Spin. It's been working very well. I'm really happy to share this at this platform. We have one more representative from Chennai Spin, Chandra Kumar around. Chandra Kumar? Maybe it's just outside. Possibly. Okay. So whether water flows between Bangalore and Chennai or not, knowledge will continue to flow.
Formally with the panelists, I would just like to summarize the key takeaways from this session. The way I looked at it, there are 3 themes that come from this session in terms of takeaways. The first theme is about structure. How do we structure work so that it is amenable to craft using? So the panel talked about multiple examples here, including factory model, including the necessity of right ingredients to be in place before you attempt any kind of craft using, and also how, for example, tools have a multiplier effect on productivity and output. So structuring elements came in full flow. The second theme that came in our panel discussion is the need for flexibility. Having taken a stand on structure, we have to take the equally sensitive stand, a similarly sensitive stand on flexibility. Are we using smart customization is one of the themes that came up. Are we focusing on the underlying process and using customizations? And are we involving stakeholders sufficiently and at the right stages, early stages? These are various questions that came around flexibility. The last theme of points came from strategy. Given the industry's current position, the need for profitability, the need for growth, how it is very important for us to focus on craft using, and how craft using is really going to help you in terms of margins, profitability, customer satisfaction, growth, and innovation. And ultimately, I would also like to rest this theme with the premise that it is only craft using that would make people outstanding, and that is the way to have excellent performance from every one of the team members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Request you to bring your hands together. Give a huge round of applause to the panelists and chairperson. Took their time in mind and also to conclude on the topic they were talking about. To acknowledge the precious time they spent in midst of us, I'd like to call upon onto this stage to honor with a memento of respect Mr. Ramki. Please put your hands together. Give a huge round of applause to Mr. Ramki. Our chairperson, Mr. K.K. Raman, ladies and gentlemen. Please put your hands together for Mr. K.K. Raman. One among our panelists, Mr. Naresh Chaudhary. Next panelist, Mr. Aman Chandra. Mr. T. Kaliraj. And Mr. K.R. Jayakumar. Thank you so much for honoring the memento of respect. Thank you so much, panelists. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to have a small interest break now. I think it's going to be only for about 15 minutes. 4-5 request you all to kindly gather back because we have an interesting session coming up. And before the interesting session, a little more interesting session, which will make you laugh to some extent from my end. So request you all to kindly get back by 4. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Good afternoon, all of you. Are we on? Okay, that's better now, yeah. Yes, I know you've all had a long day already. So I'm here not as a technical speaker today, but more from the sponsorer side actually, you know. So just a couple of things I would like to mention here that DNV is, I must say, glad to be sponsoring this event. And we are doing this for the second year consecutive. Yeah, in a way that I look at it this way that we need to keep the spin and the Bangalore chapter relevant and keep going. So I know this time around there were quite a few dates and quite a few changes that have happened, but still we've decided to stick with spin and say that we're going to do this for you this time around also actually, you know. So I must, yeah, here take this opportunity to first of all, you know, I must say it's really great with Prabhakar actually. You know, this is a gentleman. You know, I must say we do a lot of work around resilience. I think, you know, one example of resilience, I think next time I can use this reference or use this thing as reference wherever I go. You know, if you talk about persistence and being resilient, I think it's Prabhakar. So he's been with us or on our backs for quite a long time actually. And that was what has also led us to be part of, you know, this session along with all of you today. And yeah, Prabhakar, maybe a big hand for Prabhakar actually. Huh? I'm sure you're going to do this at the end of the day too, but once again now, yeah. Yes, I mean, looking at the theme of this, sorry, I just need to put this back aside a little bit. Okay. Yeah, in fact, I must say when the first time I got a mail on the theme of this conference, it left me a little baffled actually, you know. So I was wondering what are this, I didn't know how to pronounce it actually, huh? I was wondering, you know, what Kara and then using and, you know, what is this actually, yeah? So it was very interesting later on when I got to understand what this meant. So I mean, just going back a little bit, a few anecdotes before I hand over to the next session, that's a technical session. I was just wondering, and I remember the days when people were writing code. Of course, I also belong to the old generation, though I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification, where we had to write a lot of code, and it used to be a real craft actually. Yeah? And then subsequently came in, we learned a lot of things, especially the Indian IT industry and Indian service industry. We learned a lot about software engineering actually. So I was just wondering today, have we done, we have probably reached a stage where we have over-engineered actually, no more engineering left, and hence we are moving to producing actually. Yeah? So maybe we have reached a stage where engineering is all we've learned about, and then we are moving to the stage of producing actually. So I thought somewhere in between craft and craft and producing actually, there's also the engineering piece actually. So we try to convert a whole lot of craft by doing a lot of engineering, software engineering, and now we're looking at, of course, we have got a hang of this engineering. Maybe we've reached a stage where we have done a lot of over engineering. I know through your whole sessions, lot of sessions today, and maybe the session also afterwards, you must have spoke how you will manage your engineering better today through agile practices, through lean maybe, and a lot of such things. So I was just wondering, so we are moving away from, maybe from engineering to back to producing actually, So I remember I started my career as a graduate engineering trainee, as a mechanical engineer. I remember the days when we used to do welding actually, So I remember the welders used to use 2 hands to do the welding, and then they said, oh, this is too much because it takes a lot of time and the quality is not okay, quality suffer, and we depend so much on the people. If the welder is not there, my whole work for that day is gone. And sometimes these welders, of course, used to also, because they were so skilled actually, they used to demand a lot actually, So we had real problems actually, So we said, we must do something about it, So then we moved on from the welder using 2 hands to welder using only 1 hand. What we did was the welder used to use a filler rod on one hand and use the torch on the other hand actually to do the welding, So then we said, okay, let us do some automation. It's called semi-automatic welding. So we moved from using 2 hands to 1 hand. So we put the filler inside the welding torch actually, and we started doing the welding actually. So that was a semi-automated process actually. Yeah? And then we said, even that was okay, fine. Still the semi-automated process. The welder is still there. He still has to use the torch. We still depend on the welder. So how can we eliminate the welder actually? So that was the question. Yeah? So then we moved on to what was known as the automated process, where we moved in from. Said the welder has to do nothing, he has to just sit and watch when the welding is going on actually. So why don't we try and get there? So we finally got in there. So welding today, you have automated welding process where you don't have the welder to do anything. So he sets everything is automatic and the welding goes on actually. Yes, what happened? Of course, your productivity improved, your efficiency improved. But what happened to the poor welder? Probably he lost his job actually. So that's an interesting your thought, but really not. What really happened was the skill sets changed a little bit actually. So what happened was, basically the process moved to the process group actually. The process engineering group, had to do a lot of work. So they said what should be the speed, what should be the current, what should be the RPM, etc., etc. All those things were decided by the process engineers. But the welder's job was to make sure he had the tool and the setup right actually. So the focus shifted to what is known as the setup actually. So if the setup was not okay, you may do an automated welding, which is faster, which is more efficient, which probably will give you a good quality, but everything can go for a toss if you don't have the setup correct actually. So I was just looking for a synonym in software today when you do this actually. So where this is moved from what used to be craft to what you want to look at being producing actually, and where is it moving, and what probably happens to all the skill sets actually. Are the skill sets going to go away? Maybe not, but probably there will be a different kind of role that these people who are doing this will need to play as they go along actually. So that is something which comes to my mind always, and that is what is interesting. Of course, you can't stop from moving from what can be a skilled job to an automated process. That will eventually definitely happen in any field. Of course, in mechanical engineering, welding was just one example. There are several such examples in mechanical engineering which happened. I'm sure a lot of you also talked about manufacturing. I'm sure your lean, your agile, a lot of things have learned a lot from manufacturing. And I know there is a school which also thinks, why is software design development always compared to manufacturing? Maybe it should be more creative. Maybe we should compare ourselves to advertisers actually. Yeah? Then you will never sell your software or you'll never sell your product. By the way, so, so that's a bit of a challenge. I know that, but of course it will happen. So there is, it took welding, for example, it probably took about 30 to 40 years to move from what used to be a very skill-oriented and a skill-dependent or a people-person-dependent, process to move into a fully automated process actually. Yeah? So I'm sure that software also will get in there actually. Yeah? Just as small one other anecdote before I end up is. One of the things about lean was, so one of the components, the particles about lean is also about motivation actually. Again, having worked in a manufacturing industry, I can recall what motivation is. A very good example of a company that I used to work for. We used to do an assembly, and then we had to assemble. We were assembling engines, and every shift, we had a target. We had to assemble about 100 engines per shift, and every 3 years we used to have a negotiation with the union actually, and then every 3 years the target kept shifting from what used to be 100 engines per shift. We moved that to 150, and we moved that to 200, and we moved that to 250. So over the time that I spent in about 10 years, from what used to be just 100 engines per shift, we moved into a position where we were doing almost 10 times more. We were able to look at producing 100 engines per shift actually. I mean, you can imagine the amount of automation, the amount of producing that has gone in from what used to be a little bit more skill dependent. But what is interesting here was, the workers, they have an attitude, they have a mentality actually. For them, their work used to be only half a day. Yeah. So what they were doing when they were producing 100 engines, they would do all the 100 engines in the first shift, in the first half of the shift before lunch, and the second half was a sleep time for them. Now, in the next year negotiation, we moved that to, I think, 200. First time was a little slow actually. 150 or 200 is what we moved in. And then they said, of course, with the hard negotiation, they said it's impossible and all those things. But we knew, we said you are sleeping for 4 hours, but they won't accept that. We moved that to 150 or 200 or something. And then, after a few days again, what happened was, we observed, they were completing 200 engines, again in 4 hours, and using the next 4 hours to sleep actually. And then the next round of negotiations, we went in. We went in 400, 500, 600. I think till the time that I was there in that company, I remember till that time we went about 600, 700 engines per shift actually. They always made sure that the 700 engines or 600 engines that they were targeted to were still produced in 4 hours, and they had the remaining 4 hours to go to sleep. So that is the stretchability that's available actually. So when you talk about producing, so that's what it is. Actually, if you look at it, they can probably produce twice as more actually. So there's a lot of course, not just with people, but a lot of improvement around the tooling and a lot of other things that went around. We improved quite a lot. The environment improved quite a lot. So there's a lot of other things which went along with that to help them to achieve this actually. But their motivation was, to make sure that they get the sleep of 4 hours actually, and instead could produce, these engines within the first shift, within the first 4 hours of the shift actually. So that is what we have as a tolerance. So just a couple of these anecdotes I thought. Because there are several more, especially if you take examples of the manufacturing industry. But I'm sure, there is